welcome to Digital Days Gaming. My name is Dave Hunt. This is yet again not a numbered episode, so this is a special episode that we're doing, partially because of a lot of the news that's coming out this week. It's supposed to be E3 week when we're recording this, so this has been a ton of stuff would have been happening. And usually it's when we hear about a Destiny expansion, which we did. So as most of you know, Michael is not a huge Destiny fan, which is totally fine. He tried, he played, and he wasn't loving it. But I have a good friend of mine that I've known for, I don't even know now, 5-6 years probably.
Probably at least since Destiny's been around.
Yeah. So our guest today is Chandler Wood of PlayStation Lifestyles.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. Appreciate you taking the time to hang out. He is the editor-in-chief of PlayStation Lifestyles now, right? So.
Yep. Yeah, it's busy. A lot of work.
Yeah. Chandler and I met, I think, at the first PSX, or through some other random events with our previous connections, my previous connections. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And we sparked a good friendship. We've seen each other at a lot of events. We've played games with each other. We've done a lot of things together. He lives on the, I think, Utah, right?
Yep, Salt Lake City.
Yeah, so he's way out there. So I usually only see him on a couple random times in California. But we've helped each other out. He's crashed in our Airbnb on his one of his early flights home from one of the E3s we had. And we see each other quite frequently. We haven't played recently, but just because
not this year though.
Yeah,
haven't seen anybody this year.
No. All right, so the goal of this episode for myself and Chandler is to kind of just do a look back and then a look forward. So we are live on Twitch doing this. If you haven't followed us on Twitch, please do so. Twitch.tv/digitaldaysgaming. You can share the show, review, all that stuff. We're just trying to grow and get more eyes on our podcast. We're about 6 months old, and stuff's going really, really well, but it could always go just a little bit better. And also at this time, Chandler, if you just want to go ahead and push your stuff of what you do.
I'm the editor-in-chief of PlayStation Lifestyle, which is, what do I do? Who knows anymore? But run that site, and it's been 7 years now that I've been with the site, and I think about 2 or 3 years that I've been editor-in-chief, and I just play a lot of games too.
And actually completely different from me. This is Chandler's full-time job, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you guys...
my wife supports me very heavily, but yes, this is what I do from, my 9 to 5 and then some. So
nice. Yeah. I've heard about your 9 to 9s.
This week has not been kind to me. Between PS5 and Last of Us Part 2. It's been something.
Yeah. All right. So I guess off the bat, I'm curious, how did you get introduced into the Destiny franchise? Cause you're similar to me. Did you play Halo with that Bungie made?
Not really. I was never an Xbox guy. I was always the PlayStation guy. Since the PS1, it's been kind of my thing. And I never had an Xbox. I never really had many friends that had an Xbox either. So my opportunities to even play Halo were few and far between. And when I'd played it here and there. I'd never played through the full campaign or anything, but I'd heard kind of this legendary first-person shooter Halo that was so amazing and was from Bungie. And so the moment this famed first-person shooter developer was making a game that was coming to PlayStation, they had my attention. Didn't matter what it was. They were making a shooter that was coming to PlayStation. And then that just kind of snowballed from there, where you kind of learn about that, it's this MMO shooter and it's this loot shooter and all the additional little details about it was kind of a really cool thing to suddenly get into. And yeah, that's been paying attention to it since it was really first announced. And then there was even a Facebook memory, I think today, of an image of me and my wife creating our alpha characters. Was about a year ago today. Was the Destiny alpha, or a year ago, 6 years ago, back in 2014.
Yeah, and I think that was the more fascinating part of this game. Had been leaked and it was in court disputes years before it ever came out. There was a whole bunch of stuff with Bungie separating from Microsoft and who owned the IP and all that other stuff. And so a lot of us knew about I don't even know I don't even remember what it was called before Destiny. It had I'm sure it had a code name, but
Project something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so this was all over the thing, and it was going to be this like the shooter and this multiple planet, multiple destination, and then this 10-year franchise. That's what we kept hearing about, is like it's a 10-year franchise. And then they signed the deal with Activision. And then it was like this, I don't even, like $500 million game. And it was like, okay, like that's when I first started learning about there's a difference between development budgets and marketing budgets. And,
Yes.
that difference when people are like, well, this is supposed to be like this game that they put $500 million. Oh, hold up, just wait a minute. Like, and so that was their partnership with Activision was weird. Activision at the time was considered to be premier, similar to how they are now, but they weren't getting as much backlash back then as they are now in terms of what they were doing and how they were handling things. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But this was a huge deal that, like multiple platform. And then what made it even a bigger deal is that Activision and PlayStation signed like some super lucrative deal for Destiny with exclusive content, exclusive items, the bundled PlayStation. And it was like, okay, so Bungie was literally just completely moving away from Microsoft when, again, it was Activision that was signing these deals, and Bungie was just Activision was giving Bungie money to make the game. Like, and that's usually like a somewhat of a common misconception for it. So, so I guess, so like, I know that you like, and this is strategic. If you guys don't like Destiny, I probably should have said this at the beginning, but this whole podcast today, this whole episode is going to be labeled Destiny, similar to what I did a couple months ago with the Division when I did that solo for Division 2. Like, I'm telling you now, like, this is Destiny. If you don't like Destiny, don't send me a message saying that why was this whole thing Destiny. Like, just move on.
Skip it.
Yeah.
You've wasted a couple minutes already,
Yeah,
but see ya.
We'll have Chandler on again from a PlayStation aspect later on down the line when we see a little bit more things. So, but with that in mind, like, what are some of your favorite memories and your moments from playing Destiny?
Oh man, I mean, bringing it up again, back the alpha, getting into the alpha, the beta, those things were kind of just being a part of that back in 2014, I guess now 6 years ago. I'd never really been a big part of kind of the ground floor foundation of any big game or any big franchise or anything, in terms of pre-release and everything. I'd been playing games for a really long time, and I'd gotten lots of games on release day and stuff, but this was the first one that really felt like I'm here at its inception. I'm helping to really create the next big thing, with this community. I'm part of this community from the very beginning. And so looking back 6 years now, that's kind of my, one of my biggest ones is that I can look back 6 years and go, yeah, I've been part of this for 6 years, the ups and downs and everything in between.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that I remember the most about it is that I was still like, this was, and it's crazy to say this because we're actually like talking about it like the week after the PS5 was pretty much announced, is I forgot that this game was on PS3. And I had actually bought it on PS3 digitally because I was able to get the upgrade to PS4. But the reason that I bought it on PS3 is because I wanted to play it with like my brother and my nephews. That's
right. That didn't have cross-gen play back then, did it?
Not. So there was two different versions of it. That where like the PS3 ecosystem was one online ecosystem, and then the PS4 was one online ecosystem. But you were never allowed to cross. They cross play that way wasn't a thing at all yet. And it's crazy to think about that. But I remember like getting it. I had a PS4. And I bought it, like I said, I bought it on PS3. And then since I bought it digitally, I was waiting like a couple of days for the PS4 version to unlock. Like that's in 2020, that's crazy to think about it. But in 2014, like the ecosystem was not nearly as good as it is now. And so I remember playing it on PS3. And then the biggest thing was, and it was just the newness of it, of like just being able to drop in and drop out, like they were advertising that kind of cooperative thing. And there were still loading screens and there was still all this stuff that they were doing, but it was very interesting to where you could just join somebody in the middle of doing something, or they could join you in the middle of doing something. Not like, okay, when I'm done, you can join me, like that if I remember right, that was kind of a big technical feat for any game at that time.
Yeah, and then the whole cross like progression. So you have your PVE, your PvP. You've got everything kind of cross progressing together. The things you're earning in PVE, you're taking into PvP. Just this enormous game where this is your character and this is who you are, and you take this and this same play style and everything through everything. Was just a really cool concept. And then World of Warcraft was a huge thing. MMOs were a really big thing. So to take that idea, that MMO idea that was such a PC thing, and to pull it, one, to console, and then two, into a first-person shooter was just unheard of. And again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but as far as I'm remembering, there's kind of rose-tinted glasses on, but I really still think there's nothing that has quite done Destiny like what Destiny has done.
I agree, and that's sometimes when I'm talking to people about the game, and they're just like, "Well, this," I go like, "Well, this isn't good, and this isn't good, and this isn't good," and I'm like, "Well, yeah," I go, "but I'm still to this day like, I mean, I love this game, and this game has changed my life in terms of why Digital Days is here, how I did as a podcaster, how I did as interviewing. Like, you guys have heard me tell that before, but there is not any other game I can think of other than like an athletic sport that have had a chunk of like 6 years of my life attached to. Like, you hear about people that are attached to a certain battlefield or attached to, I mean, maybe Counter-Strike would be the only like similar thing because of how old Counter-Strike is. But in terms of on console, especially a growing, evolving, expanding game, I don't think plenty of companies have tried, but nobody's nearly been on the tier and been able to be as successful as Bungie has with Destiny, whether you think it's a good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah, there's you always get the term Destiny killer, mm-hmm. and at the same time, even before Destiny killer, there was always, oh, this is going to be the Halo killer. Mm-hmm. So it's funny that Bungie is the one that has come out and created these games that then have other companies trying to make the Halo killer, trying to make the Destiny killer, and Bungie just does. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to this eventually, so I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but the kind of experimental things they do with this game, even when they're not perfect, they're still really, really cool feats of technology that you're not seeing really anywhere else except in recent memory, Fortnite kind of doing some hurdles and leaps to break what games are doing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so real quick, I've got a bullet point of things, and I just kind of want to go through like a quick recap of like the history of Destiny. So we had, like you already talked about, like the alpha. They announced this at a PlayStation press conference, and they're like, and you can play it now. And I know for a lot of you guys, like, and I was at home at the time, I wasn't attending E3, but the trying to download that, like, it broke PSN that day. Like, it completely broke the PlayStation Network that day. Not that the PlayStation Network was ever very stable, but at the time.
Not in 2014, no.
So then the game launched. And so, like, that's what I call Destiny Vanilla. So it had a very weird story. It wasn't linear like people were expecting it to be. You didn't really exactly, it wasn't very clear on where you had to go or what you had to do. The campaign, as you would call it, or the direction you were supposed to go wasn't always clear. But I think a lot of it was protected by people were still trying to figure out exactly what the game was and how the systems in the game worked. So I think that you started hearing more about Destiny's vanilla story being bad as you got into like October and November and December, farther away from the game being released, as more people were like experiencing it, like, oh, it's a really cool game. And it's like, all right. And they were so used to playing like even a single player game or a multiplayer game of going, okay, point A, point B, point C. And there wasn't like this other dynamic to it of this open, quote unquote, open world aspect that they had. Like, we'd had open world games before, but nothing that it really had a kind of a campaign like that, as broken and jagged as it was.
When I first reviewed it, because I've at this point, back then I was even just a contributor for PlayStation Lifestyle, and but I've since reviewed every single Destiny release that has come out, expansions and full releases and everything. And when I first reviewed it, I think my subheader for it was Prologue to Greatness. It was this thing where critically I could understand, yes, it's not quite there yet, they're still working with it. They're experimenting with this weird thing, this weird way of storytelling, this weird gameplay, all these gameplay systems and the loot systems and everything. And then, but you had these really, really cool moments. And something that I called out in my review was that, you know, there was a lot of verticality with the game too, and you had these cool moments where you're playing with friends and you're just getting swarmed by all these enemies, and you know, I jumped out of the way, and this seems ridiculous to think was really awesome now 6 years later in the game. But I was like, I had this rocket launcher and I jumped out of the way and I fired this rocket and saved my friends and barely survived by the skin of my teeth. And it was those little moments and these kind of story creating moments within the missions for myself, like being that guardian, being this character that is, I don't want to call it necessarily the chosen one, but you know, you're not role playing some other character, some specific character. Like, you are this guardian who's come back to life, and you've got to do this stuff. And those moments were what was really, really cool to me. The lore was really cool, and was getting into, you know, the deeper parts of the lore and everything. But I loved that aspect of the gameplay where you kind of created your own story through how you played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that was the thing that that even to this day they still struggle with, because like it's a very heavy multiplayer focused game, but also the story they're telling is about you versus your guardian versus the environment. And it almost seems like it's one of those things where you're kind of like by yourself, but then you realize that there's a bunch of other you know, there's other guardians that are walking around, but the way it was portrayed is like you're the only one, like you're the most powerful person and you're the savior.
Yeah, it's interesting how they kind of cross the lore that way, where there's like, you are the guardian, but also it makes sense in world and in lore and everything that there are multiple guardians. The whole MMO aspect of it makes sense from a perspective of this raised, you know, quote unquote zombie army, basically.
Yeah. So, and then so that was kind of going on. That story was going on. People were playing that. And then I actually, like, I don't know why I remembered this when I was just kind of like writing these notes up, but we actually had an event in Destiny very early on, the Queen's Court event, where we were
those doors opened.
Yeah. So the socials, and again, this was like, wow, this changed. Like, the tower was somewhere that you went as a hub, and then the tower changed. And you would load in on a Tuesday and the game would reset. Like, and it would, again, back when I was playing Destiny, like, I didn't know what reset was. I didn't know what daily resets were. You know, like, that was a different dynamic. And then all of a sudden you drop in, you hear about this event, and then this curtain is open, or this metal door is open, and there's a whole nother area of the tower, and there's this massive ship, and then there's this Queen's event. She has, it's Petra, actually, who ends up being a pretty influential character in the game later on. She has all these bounties and things to do, and this is where people were like, wait a minute, like, because what it was is like, this is kind of where the MMO came in, and a lot of first person shooters and a lot of Halo players didn't understand how MMOs worked, myself included, of like, okay, so you want me to pick up this bounty that says to go shoot 10 things in the head, and that's all I got to do? Like, so
play whatever I want and go do that thing. Yeah, it was a new dynamic, because you weren't playing levels necessarily. You're not going, oh, I'm playing Halo and I'm playing through the campaign level 3, or I'm not going in and I'm playing multiplayer and that's it. It was, yeah, this idea of you can kind of mix and match what you're doing. You can pick up these bounties to go over here and do this. And it's funny talking about bounties now, considering where we'll eventually get to. But yeah, it was an interesting dynamic. And the idea of live events and a changing, evolving game, again on a console, because you look back in World of Warcraft and stuff like that was already doing this kind of thing way before that. And you know, you hear Luke Smith talk, and that's a lot of the core inspiration for Destiny, was a lot of what World of Warcraft was doing and continues to be. But for console players, for first person shooter players, it was a whole different dynamic that we were just not used to.
Yeah, because they were, when they saw an event happen, they were necessarily expecting something new to do, which there wasn't, but there wasn't anywhere new to go, but there was new things to do and new things to earn, by doing the same stuff that you'd already done before, just with a little bit different, which people kind of had a hard time wrapping their head around. And then telling your friend, like, hey, like, you should really check it out. The queen's here and she's only going to be here this week. Like, what do you mean she's only going to be here this week? Like, that's, that got into the weird part of, like, the first time you started hearing people going, well, I paid for this game and you're telling me I have to do something at a certain amount of time. Like, that doesn't seem like right. Like, what am I paying for? And again, Bungie was doing something on console that hadn't been done before. And I'm sure Bungie's probably sitting there like, wait a minute, all these PC games do this all the time. Like, why are you mad at us?
That's also back in the day again, where the divide between console and PC was way more. We're talking about this in 2020, and a lot of it seems so ridiculous. But back in 2014, even the divide between console and PC was such a bigger rift than it is now. There were a lot of people that were dedicated. I'm a PC gamer. That's it.
Yeah, it's not coming to PC. I don't play it.
Exactly. And Destiny was not on PC back then either.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, it was just interesting. So they did the Queen's Court event, and then Vault of Glass came out, and this was like the first like 6-player activity, and it took a team like 18, or I don't remember the exact time, but it took them a long time to get through. It was like 18 or 20 hours, like an elite team of 6 players that have, that were understanding stuff. And and again, like every raid that Destiny's brought out, with the exception of a couple, have been a multiple hour thing, like like double digit hours. And then after they understand the mechanics and figured out, they're beating it in 45 minutes or 30 minutes or 8 minutes. Like, you've seen some things happen now. But
I've seen from the raid designers too, that's actually the concept. That's the design of the raid, is they say it should take you 12 hours to figure out, or 20 hours to figure out, and 20 minutes to finish once you're an expert at it, or something like that. There's some like design concept behind that, where they want to have that gap and that divide.
Mm-hmm. But again, this was a new thing. Like, when they started touting this, like 6-player raid activity, people were like, what? Like 6 people doing the same thing? And like, you'd had 6-player multiplayer matches, you had 6 players on a team. You could be in a group and hanging out, but you never had something that 6 of you were working together to fight one thing and do the same goal, and to earn stuff while you were doing it. And not only to earn stuff while you were doing it, earn stuff that somebody else might have wanted.
And the puzzle mechanics too were huge and really new. And this whole idea of, okay, so we can't damage this guy, so wait, we have to divide up, and 3 of us have to go over here and do this, and you have to go over here and do this. And there's this whole communication thing where it wasn't like a strike where you could just hop in and everybody's shooting everything, and once in a while a shield pops up, but one person can kind of take down the shield or do whatever. You had to call it
out. Hey, I need help over here, or this. Okay, I see this, so everybody has to come over here. Like, and that was fun. Like, I remember some of my first raid experiences, and the people that I played Destiny with at launch are still, like, there's a handful of them, whether they've moved away from the game or not, that are still close, almost closer than my in real life friends. Like, these are people that I would consistently play the game with on hours on end and conversate, and we would just hang out and chill and play and work on things. And these were people that are to this day are still close friends of mine. And this experience was always interesting. And then and this is where the first kind of like some of the chinks in the armor for Destiny were happening. Like, people were starting to nick away at the story. Like, well, this is supposed to be this epic story, and I don't really see it, and blah, 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 blah. And then they started understanding the light level system that was attached to your gear, to your armor only at the time. And then also that's when people started learning about random number generation, RNG. And to where they're like, I've ran this raid 7 times every week, and this is November, and this damn game won't give me a pair of boots, and since I can't get the boots from the raid, I'm forever 29. And it was...
Yeah, that was... I think Bungie was figuring out that at the same time, too, where they were going, oh, oops, yeah, that's a big issue where, we're not waiting towards what you don't have. So now somebody could get a helmet 3 times in a row, or somebody could get a helmet and then a chest piece and then legs, and then a helmet again, and then another chest piece, and what you end up needing is arms, and you're never getting that. Yeah, Forever 29 was, I mean, that's a memory of a whole different light system too, where the level cap was 20, and then the additional 10 levels on top of that were your light level.
Yep, and that's where the game had a problem too, though, is like where you hit 20. Like for the most part, if you played through the campaign correctly and you weren't kind of like speed running through it and running through things, and you kind of followed the directions as vague as they were, but if you kind of went through it correctly, you were pretty much 17 or 18 by the time you were done with the campaign. You ran a couple strikes and did some things, and then all of a sudden you were 20, and then that was like, and that's when people were starting to figure out like the Nightfall, and then I still remember like different tiers of the Nightfall depending on your experience level, and getting like strange coins, and not knowing what strange coins were for at the time, and then why like my head glowed after, or I had a like flaming head after I did the Nightfall, like, and just like learning like what end game meant. And I had never played a game that had a quote unquote end game. Most people were like, I finished the story, I'm done. Like, well, not really. And you're actually kind of missing the coolest part, because you had to be like light level, like 24 or 25 to even do Vault of Glass, to then get you the gear that would get you to level 30. And then again, you actually had to level that gear up. So that was another thing that people were having a hard time understanding. And that's where the bounties came in, where you got a gun. And not only like, because we look at it now like, oh, this gun only has this and this. Like, I don't like it, get rid of it. Oh, this gun has this and this. This might be cool. They shoot it for an hour. Oh, I don't like it, get rid of it. You actually had to level the gun up and your armor up to do, to learn the perks. And that was the thing that I think a lot of these live games are missing. You actually, as you progress through the game, and this was a huge criticism I had of Anthem at the time, looking forward, of when you were doing something as a level 10 or a level 11 or 12 in Destiny with a blue gun, or and then what you did when you had a legendary gun, and then what you did when you had a legendary gun that was fully upgraded with all the perks, like that felt different.
Yeah,
to see Firefly proc on a weapon that you couldn't get on a legendary weapon, that you couldn't get on a rare or an uncommon weapon, and to see the effect of it, and to see what you could do when you were on level with something, or even slightly above level with something, was amazing. Of like shooting, like still till this day, like shooting Fatebringer into a swarm of Hive and just watching it, just the head explode, and then all of the arc stuff go around and kill everything else. You're like, wait a minute. Or throwing a grenade, or learning that the helmet really helped your super. Like if you were a warlock and you had like an exotic helmet on for your Nova Bomb, and then just throw your super and get your entire Nova Bomb back from killing so many things. People were like, wait a minute. And then the build crafting kind of started happening.
There's the other thing too that we can touch on, is exotics. That whole idea of like this exotic piece. Oh, you can only have one piece of exotic armor, one exotic weapon equipped at a time. That was a really interesting dynamic too. And again, 6 years later in 2020, it's something that we look at and we kind of take for granted, and it's fine. And we just understand that's how you play the game. But back then that was like, oh, I got this yellow piece of gear. That's really cool. What do I do with it? Oh, I put it on. Oh, I got this other one. Oh, I can't equip both of them at once. Oh, I've got to kind of figure out what I want to do and how I want to do this. And now we're almost drowning in exotics in a way. And it's definitely interesting to look back and see what are still things that are in the game that we take for granted now, that were new and just crazy back then.
So then kind of moving along, like we got near December of 2014, and they had already talked about this. Like we knew that this Dark Below, this expansion, I'm using air quotes when I say it, like this expansion was coming. And they started explaining it and teasing it with trailers, and they started talking about what was going on. They introduced a new NPC to the tower. So again, the tower was changing. This is the first time we saw Eris. And we had, I don't even remember what it was, 3 or 5 story missions, 1 or 2 weapons that were given to us, and a new raid. And so people were like, got on that day, and I think that they were kind of expecting it to be something similar to the vanilla campaign, and then they play it. I probably am cutting it short a little bit, but they play it for 5 or 6 hours, 3 or 4 hours, and they were done. And they're like, people are like, wait a minute. And then on top of it, the level cap went up to 32, and all of your gear that you had couldn't go any higher. So this is the first time they introduced kind of like a brick wall, and then this is also where they kind of introduced a little bit of a paywall, to where if you didn't buy the next thing on, I think it came out early December, like December 8th or 10th or something like that year, like you really, you paid $60 and you could play some other stuff, but Destiny from vanilla, from launch to the Dark Below releasing, that was kind of it. You needed that vanilla base to have Crota's End, but if you didn't have, if you didn't have Dark Below, then you kind of were kind of done.
Yeah, it was a weird dynamic for those of us who were we were in it, and we knew, and we were in it, and we loved it, and we knew we were moving on to the next thing. It kind of created a divide within the community, because you had this really back and forth where those of us who were like, yep, we're charging forward, we're going right through with this, we're going into the next expansion, we have no problem paying for that kind of stuff. I say this lightly as paying for it, because again, I didn't pay for a lot of Destiny throughout my years, and I spent a lot on like silver and that kind of stuff. I guess we'll get into Eververse at some point, but I spent a lot through there and on like collector's editions and stuff, because I knew I wasn't actually paying for a lot of these expansions because I was reviewing them, and I wanted to support the game outside of just getting the review copies, and this was something that I still loved. But yeah, it really created this divide within the community with these people who weren't entirely sold on the next expansion, or maybe couldn't even afford it, and suddenly got left behind, where the rest of us were all pushing on through and going to the next thing. And that was a big sticking point right around that first year of Destiny.
So then there was obviously the raid. So Crota's End came out, and this was a raid that it was a level 30 raid for normal mode. So most of the people were on level, but it was determined that it was easier or necessary to have like a level 31 in there to help you like run the sword mechanic to fight the boss. And on top of it, it was at launch, it was a very, very glitchy raid, like very glitchy. Like
pulling the Ethernet cable on Crota.
Crota running into the room, or using the lamps to help boost you up to jump higher so you could circumvent something, cheesing the bridge, like being up high and sniping across, like many things.
Was that really the start of I mean, Vault of Glass, there were some cheeses that people tried to start doing.
You could, at launch, or you could put like they found out that they could push Atheon.
You could push,
you could push Atheon, and you could push Templar off. So there was things that players were like figuring out, and that became a little bit of a problem. Where like even me at the time with our community, like I was into the game, and I had a group of guys that were into the game, and we had people that were struggling in the game, and I was helping a lot of people do a lot of things at that time, and they're like, well, I only know how to do this, and I'm like, I would do certain things like that with my core crew, and like, all right, this is like the 4th or 5th time we're doing this, like we're trying to help 3 people get their stuff, like let's just push this dude off, like,
well, I'm gonna jump forward just a little bit to Last Wish with Riven. I would say 80% of the community never knew how to do Riven legit. Because of the Riven cheese. This is Last Wish on Destiny 2. The Riven cheese, where you could just like annihilate Riven without actually doing the full mechanics. And there were entire systems and entire puzzles and mechanics of this encounter that you're not actually encountering when you're cheesing Riven. Which to me, I think was one of the biggest issues of kind of cheesing an encounter. Most of the other encounters, you still had to engage with a lot of the mechanics, but then you cheese something and you just ended it quicker. With Riven, you actually didn't engage with
mechanic.
Like 2/3 of the entire encounter.
But do you think that the reason why that became so dominant is because there's the possibility that the encounter was a little bit too challenging?
Absolutely. I think Riven, with my core crew, when we finished it the first time, I think I've only done it like 3 or 4 times absolutely legit. And when we finished it the first time, we did it legit because we wanted to make sure that we finished it as it was intended. And I still think it's one of the coolest encounters in Destiny ever, in Destiny raids ever. But yes, it is not an entirely friendly encounter when it comes to newer players and when it comes to running people through and teaching people, and just in gaming in general. If you have an easy path and
path of least resistance.
Path of least resistance. If you have that path of least resistance where people are going to put their time in on a Saturday night to go do a raid, then you're going to get to Riven. You're all going to look at the clock and you're going, all right, I'm getting kind of tired. Should we? Yeah, let's just cheese Riven. There were a ton of nights where we intended to go in and do Riven completely legit, and we'd get to the end of the raid and we'd go, let's just cheese it and get it over with. We're tired. We're done. We don't want to do this legit. And because the path of least resistance is available, we'll take it. Gamers will take it. That's what's happening with Forges right now, but we'll get to that probably in a minute.
Yeah. So and that was like, you talked about, like, Crota had its issues, and then people found out that you could, like, unplug your Ethernet cable and Crota would stay down. And, so there was all these things going on, to the point of where I think there was so much problems with Dark Below and the Crota's End, where originally House of Wolves was supposed to come out like in March, and they actually ended up delaying it like 2 months. So they had to come out and say that in order to work on some things, and they were getting tons of feedback from the community of doing this stuff, and then they had to delay House of Wolves, and then they bring House of Wolves out in May. So this is still in the first year that Destiny's out, and they bring House of Wolves out, and this is where we get introduced to a new social space. We get introduced to Trials of Osiris, and we also get introduced to Prison of Elders, which is a non-raid endgame content. That had light level difficulty issues, encounter difficulty issues, and a no checkpoint system. This is also where I feel like PvP got a spotlight shined on it that really started changing the dynamics of PvP, and then we started hearing about the word balance.
Yeah, Trials definitely did that. That was that set off the PvP community, and original Trials was, I mean, I'll almost say this is a theme with everything that Bungie's been releasing for Destiny, is that there are so many great things. There are so many awesome things and really cool experiments that they're doing and really cool changes that they're making. And then it also comes with its fair share of issues and its fair share of problems and its fair share of, whether you individually feel like it's an issue or a problem or not, there's something that the community is going to come in and say, this is an issue, this is a problem, we don't like this. It's just kind of been the cycle of Destiny. For the most part, I've been happy with those kinds of things. But yeah, Prison of Elders, for example, with House of Wolves, that was not my kind of content. It wasn't what I really liked. I thought, like you said, encounter difficulty issues. I thought
it's just time commitment. Skolas. It's just time commitment for Skolas. For it being a non-raid activity, and the mechanic is, at the time, it had a harder mechanic than Vault of Glass and Crota's End had.
Yeah, Skolas was easily probably the hardest encounter, and one of the things that I would say I'm most proud of. I want to say I only finished Skolas like twice.
Dude, I beat him like 50 times to helping community members, because it was a tick box on the Moments of Triumph.
Yeah. I think that's the only reason I ended up ever getting it done. I didn't get it done in House of Wolves era immediately. I got it done when Moments of Triumph came around, had to get it done, and I was like, all right, guys, come on. I need somebody to help me run this through, because nobody wanted to do it either, because it was so hard. It was really, unenjoyable.
The loot was terrible. Like the guns that came from it were terrible. Like, do you remember Shankburn as a perk? So it was that you did bonus damage to Shanks, and I'm like, really? Like, this is where but this is also where Etheric Light was introduced into Destiny 1. And this allowed you to bring, because they had set the standard of, okay, there's the vanilla, there was Crota's End, and those are different level systems and different. Therefore, there was only certain items that could be used. Like they pretty much wanted you, whatever you had legendaries you had earned, they wanted you to earn new legendaries. And the reason why they were able to say you needed to earn the new legendaries because they had a higher attack power for weapons and they had a higher light level cap for armor. And so then when that was something that they got a lot of hate from, of like, well, they want their Vision of Confluence, they want their Fatebringer, they want their Found Verdict, they want to be able to do that stuff. And they also were making us re-level exotics at the time too. And so this was people were like, what the heck is going on? Like, wait a minute, and it was like, you're not respecting our time. And it was one of those things where people were very confused, like when it was almost like a reset button was hit. So then I think that was part of the reason why House of Wolves got delayed and got pushed back. Cause they're like, well, we can't, cause if I had to guess, they were like, well, they were just going to do the exact same thing with House of Wolves.
And as with everything that Bungie has done, the idea, the theories behind it, the structure of why they were doing what they were doing, it was in a sound space. It was something that was like, it was understandable why they're trying to do this, because any other way of doing it, suddenly you have no reason to play. It kind of ties into what they're doing now with sunsetting weapons. And it's kind of an evolution off of what they've been trying to do basically since the first expansion ever came out, is figure out how do you prevent that power creep? How do you take that back and say, okay, we're adding new stuff that we want you to play with, but we don't want you to necessarily continue to rely on all your old stuff as a crutch, because then none of the new stuff is new and exciting. So how do we solve that problem? And that's been a back and forth for basically 6 years now.
Mm-hmm. Dude, we're going to be here forever. We're barely even through year one.
Well, we can kind of speed through some of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, all that thing was happening. Like Trials was doing well. Like Trials is kind of what carried Destiny towards the end of year one. And then by this time though, like House of Wolves came out, and like a month later they announced at E3, like Taken King, Destiny Taken King. And people were like, is this Destiny 2? And they're like, no. And they're like, so how much does it cost? And they're like, $40. They're like, wait, your other stuff only costs like $20. Like, why does this one cost 40? And, like people were like, well, this is dumb. Like the amount of confusion that was surrounding that announcement was crazy. And this was my first E3 when they announced Taken King. Was my first E3. And I got to check out some of the stuff and to see. So
that would have been 2015, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was E3 2015. Taken King was announced. They and with that announcement, they showed off new subclasses, a new destination. So like, here's a new place for you to go, and we didn't know what that was at the time. I think they had called it the Dreadnought at this point in time. And here's a new guy, here's a new boss and a new villain to go after, which we never really understood. Like in the Vault of Glass, like why we were fighting Atheon. We kind of knew why we were fighting Crota a little bit, but then we're like, all right, so Taken King. Like here comes Crota's daddy. He's pissed.
Well, and here was where, that was where they really started to pull the lore forward, and they started to say, okay, we're telling this story. We're telling this really ongoing story, because Vault of Glass, if you dove into the lore and the lore cards and everything, there was a lot of really interesting stuff there. But the campaign of Destiny didn't really flow into Vault of Glass very cleanly. It didn't get to that point. Taken King was
Vault
the
of Glass
first.
Was like lived in a vacuum. It was kind of just it just showed up, and you're like, okay, why are we going there? It's like. And then when
if you went into lore, it made sense to a certain extent.
Then Crota's End came out, and we kind of learned like what was going on. Like he's trying to do this, and we're gonna go stop him from doing this. And then Skolas was like, okay, well Skolas is trying to do this, and you're gonna stop Skolas from doing this. And then we put him in prison, and now you go fight him in prison.
Yeah. So Taken King comes along, and suddenly they're expanding on existing story, and they're going, oh, by the way, you know what you did to Crota? Well, yeah, Daddy's mad, and he's coming to the solar system with a fleet of ships, and he's gonna come annihilate you, and it's gonna be fun.
And this is also where they started, Bungie started doing a ton of foreshadowing. So the groundwork for what Taken King started with, when you like the very beginning, if you pay very close attention to in game to some of the groundwork that they laid in Taken King, they were already laying the foundation for Destiny 2.
Destiny 2 and the ensuing expansions, even up to where we are now, and where we're starting to learn about more about Savathun and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. Yeah, they've been laying this groundwork since 2015.
Yeah. So, and with Taken King, we got a much longer, fleshed out story. I mean, I'm guilty as everybody else. I went in, and this is kind of where like I became a little bit of a Titan main playing, because I'm like, I'll just start on my Titan. I'll do him first because I don't really like him as much as I liked my Warlock at the time, and then it wasn't 3-4 hours. It was 3-4-5 days that you were playing on your character before you're like, okay, you're done. And it's like, you're not, and you weren't really done. So people were very surprised at that. And we also got what can be argued to be one of the best raids that Destiny's ever released in King's Fall. It was a multiple boss encountered raid. It had jumping puzzles, and it had probably one of the coolest boss mechanics that they've done at the time.
Well, and it followed directly off of the story too.
Mm-hmm.
So it made this really interesting thing where you go through the campaign, you get to the end of the campaign, and he takes himself and goes back into his taken throne world, and then you're like, wait, I thought I killed him. I didn't kill him. Oh, in order to continue on and really kill this guy, I've got to enter his throne world, and I've got to go in and get him and kill him there. So the raid really made sense from a story perspective, where people who wanted to push through on the campaign and wanted to do that, it wasn't this extra thing. It was, this is a core part of the story that you need to do if you want to continue understanding how the story works.
Right. So, I mean, and that fed a lot of people's hunger. September, October, and November were really, really good. Like during that time in 2015, people were very happy, and they're like, "This is, like all the articles of like, this is what Destiny should have been at launch," and and I was just like, well, this is just a continuation. But again, this introduced a very heavy paywall where it's like, okay, like Taken King they're drawing the line in the sand. They reset your gear again. They changed the XP system, like you said. They started changing the light level system, how the light level system worked. This is when we first kind of got introduced to a little bit of separate grinding your light versus grinding your XP, like two different numbers. They were introducing some things differently.
That was when they changed everything. That was and that's kind of what set the pace for the fall expansions too, being the big kind of system changers and mechanics
the new
changers.
Year of Destiny.
Yeah. So, and then at this point too, like you said, it's a paywall for those who had been with Destiny since the beginning. Suddenly they're at $120 at this point, $130, because we're talking $30 for the expansion pass that gave you the House of Wolves and Dark Below expansions, and then another $40 for Taken King. So yeah, you're at $130 now if you've been at Destiny, and that was unreal and unheard of again for console players. People who played MMOs on PC, they were used to paying monthly subscriptions and all this, so it kind of didn't hit quite as hard. You look at something like Final Fantasy 14, they're paying for the expansions and a monthly subscription just to continue that game.
Well, in that, again, if you did the math, like you're talking about, like, okay, at this point in time, like if this was any other franchise, if it was Call of Duty, if it was Assassin's Creed, if it was anybody else, it would have been Destiny 2. And it would have been another $60. So it's like, and I was like, okay, so like you just said, you take those numbers together. You take the base Destiny that was $60, the expansions that were like $15 or $20 a piece, and then the $40. Like, okay, so you're at $130, $140, depending on how you decided to pay. I go, that's how much it would have cost for you to buy a new game in September of 2014 and then buy the sequel in 2015. So I never really understood this whole dynamic to it. And they're like, yeah, but I have to own this. Like at that point in time, they started like introducing Destiny the Collection, where you had all the stuff prior and you had Taken King, and that was like $60 or $65. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of how much the game cost. And then Spark of Light and the catch-up mechanic and all this stuff was being introduced. And again, like there was the positivity around, okay, Taken King is good, it borderline great of what they're accomplishing, but they still screwed this player. And it was like it started becoming into this battle of like they can't win. Like, oh, I want new content, but I don't want to pay for it. Like, what? You were on the 9th version of Assassin's Creed,
I mean, yeah, 9 times 60 at that point. Yeah, you're paying a whole lot of money for yearly Call of Duty, yearly Assassin's Creed. So this is really no different. And actually, to me, was almost in a way better, because suddenly I'm not putting behind the progress that I made in the last game to a certain extent. Some of the stuff there were some gaps where they're sunsetting weapons and armor and stuff, but at the same time, I'm still playing the game that I played, that I'm used to. They're just adding a ton of new content to it, and that was, again, as a console only player at the time, that was super exciting to me. This new world and this new fresh approach to how I got to continue my games, and I didn't have to leave my games behind or my characters behind. You have to leave some stuff behind, obviously, but it was exciting. It was really cool.
Yeah. So then we also got, so then we had our first PSX, our first PlayStation Experience. And at PlayStation Experience, they're like, hey, we've got a Destiny announcement. And it was Sparrow Racing League.
Which was out of left field. Like, what? They took this thing, and I think SRL was the first time where we really saw that
this is a true live game.
Well, it's a true live game, and the community was suddenly really influencing things that were going on, because since the start of the game, since people could hop on their Sparrows, they'd been doing makeshift races through the Cosmodrome since vanilla.
So you can get to the back wall first.
Exactly. You're like, yeah, race around here and then loop around this and then come back. And, just these makeshift races, these unofficial little races on Sparrows, and having fun with it and learning the strategies of how you can drive the Sparrow around. And it's still a thing now where when you're racing your friends to go someplace on a Sparrow, you do that. And they've worked it into the content a little bit more, including into raids and dungeons and stuff now. But that was the first time where we really saw that they'd been kind of paying attention to the community and what the community was doing, and adapting that into the game in a way to kind of say, like, this is your game. Like, we're going to work with you. We're going to make this your game, and do things for you for fun. You enjoy this. Okay, we're setting a team aside. We're going to create a racing game out of Destiny. That's a entirely temporary content too, which was bizarre to me. But that was the exciting thing, where it's like, if you're part of this community, you're part of something big.
Yeah. So we had Sparrow Racing for like the holiday event. I think that's also when like strike scoring came in there, but that kind of just felt like that was pretty much just kind of par for the course. But then after Sparrow Racing, for that in the year 2 of Destiny, we went through a massive content drought, where like January, February, March, April was nothing. We had no Crota's End like expansion. I mean, Dark Below like expansion. There was no House of Wolves thing on the agenda. They came out and said, it's Taken King, it's the raid mode, hard mode, it's the challenge mode, it's the, and then people are like, they're like, they came to them and said, hey, look, you told us you didn't like Dark Below's expansion. You didn't really like House of Wolves expansion. So we focused our energy on making sure that Taken King was right, and now we're focusing. At that time, we thought they were focusing their energy on the sequel.
Yeah, that was the big rumor, and what the leaked presentation slides and stuff that were coming out were showing, that there should be a sequel coming 2016.
And that started with people going, wait, I thought this was a 10-year franchise, and people were like, okay, well, it's a 10-year franchise, not a 10-year game. Like, that's when you started hearing a little bit about that conversation. But again, like you were saying, based on listening to the community feedback, we got a spring update in late April of 2015, which introduced a new strike, and it also introduced Eververse.
That introduced Eververse, and it also, wasn't that the one that also pulled forward all the raids and made them relevant again?
That was year 3.
Oh, that was okay. That was Rise of Iron. So we'll get there.
Yeah. So this is where they started kind of showing cosmetic armor, where they kind of really got into like the Taken armor, and then like you could earn certain things. Then they were giving us a new strike, and they then they gave us kind of a somewhat of a new event. I don't really remember much of it, but there was new armor that you could earn for the like it was kind of preparing you a little bit, I think, at the for Rise of Iron, because it was kind of like I remember the armor having a winter-y look to it in a spring update. And I think that they, around this time, they had realized that they were not going to be able to release Destiny 2 at that time. And so when they weren't able to produce Destiny 2 at that time, they announced Rise of Iron, which again introduced another social space to the game, another new raid, and it was a new expansion, smaller than King's Fall. They were setting expectations right away that it was going to be smaller than King's Fall, but again, a really, really cool raid. Like, the raid team was doing an amazing job at this time. I mean, you're talking about King's Fall and Wrath of the Machine back to back. Very, very good raids.
I loved Wrath. It was so cool, the wall encounter and the idea of this raid. You know, previously we'd been going into other spaces. We'd been going into the Vault of Glass was the Vex's space. Going into King's Fall and Crota's End and everything, that was going into the Hive space and the Taken space. And suddenly, you know, Wrath of the Machine, that was our first Fallen raid. Technically Fallen, I guess they were Siva Fallen, but it was interesting because the Fallen space, because of how they're scavengers, that was our space. And so we're inside the wall of the Cosmodrome, and it all just felt really familiar and was a really interesting context around the raid too. And
again, it tied into the events that were going on again really, really well. We got introduced to Siva. They did a really good job of telling the story with that. We had a really cool exotic quest. You know, but again, it was like, now we're at you're at your third different social space, and like logging in on a reset day was like, okay, go to the tower, pick up a couple things, go to the reef, pick up a couple things, go to the temple, pick up a couple things. And it was getting kind of like a little bit monotonous in terms of, you know, your ability to, and this was like, again, where they were just laying content on top of content on top of content, and
systems on systems and
currencies on currencies. Yeah. And people were like, okay, this is getting a little much. And they're like, there's so much stuff here, and, you know, different weapons again. And like, they were reskinning weapons. Like, we were like in the Wrath of the Machine raid, you were getting Gunsmith's auto rifle with Siva sticking out of it, you know, like, and there was a lot of that stuff that was going on. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't really even like touch upon, like re-rolling weapons, of trying to do RNG protection. And there's so many things that like they were changing and evolving and working on in the game, all of that. And they came, and I truly feel like, you know, and like Chandler and I will, you know, we saw this, we got to interview this, we got to talk to them about this. They truly believe this next decision they were making was the correct decision for what the community was saying that they wanted. And what they felt at that time the correct decision was to blow it all up and start over.
Yep.
And to blow it, go ahead.
So you're talking going into Destiny 2.
Yeah.
And to me, I find that decision and at the time and looking back and everything hard to argue with, because like we talked about, they were having a lot of problems with power creep. They're having a lot of problems with, okay, how do we keep introducing all these? How do we introduce new things, new powerful things, new abilities without having them be overly powerful from the old things? How do we introduce new things and have them be interesting and desirable when you have people who, they already love their weapons and loadouts, so why do they want anything new? You know,
but at the same time, you had the player that said, you had player base that was screaming like, it's not fair that guy played one match of Crucible and got a perfectly rolled IS Luna, and I played 100 matches of Crucible and I don't have one. Like, this is too punishing. Like, and you know, this random number generation is too punishing, and you know, like that you can go and run the raid 20 times and not get the, you know, the auto rifle that you want or the hand cannon you want, and my buddy can run the raid once and get it, and you know, like, and you know.
Like, taking a step back a little bit too, there's something we have to consider here. Rise of Iron was when they finally dropped support for the PS3.
Mm-hmm.
We have to remember that this game was designed, Destiny 1 was designed for the lowest common denominator of the PS3 360 generation. And it worked on PS4 and Xbox One, but at the time, you know, it worked on both. Rise of Iron, they finally dropped that, but there were still a lot of systems, and a lot of the core way that Destiny was designed was limited by the fact that it had been designed around last gen.
Yeah, and they actually came out and said that. They were saying certain things of like, in your vault, like, you can't compare, you can't look at things you can't bring up too many menus because there's not enough I don't know the technical term, but there's not enough RAM in the PS3 to do it. Like it wasn't able to do that. So therefore, since it doesn't work in the PS3, we can't make it work on the PS4. That can't happen because
there had to be parity between the two versions.
Yeah. So like that, and then I still remember doing an interview with Eric Osborne, and I said, hey, so what's up with the content with cutting off the prior gen consoles? He's like, the game's too big, it won't fit. He goes, if we were to produce it on prior gen consoles, we would have to remove something from the game to make it to add this new content. He goes, it just won't fit. There's a cap.
Oh, the irony.
yeah. There's a cap, and it's like, okay, and they're like, it'll work on PS4, it'll work on Xbox One, but it wouldn't work on on the prior gen consoles. So they're like, we had to drop it. And I think that them being transparent at the time, like that was good. That they were explaining to people, and they gave people ample notice of like, hey, this is ending, and this is stopping, and all those things. And it still didn't go over like super well with a lot of people, because I don't even like, so we're 3 years into this generation, into the PS4 Xbox One generation, and like people were still kind of annoyed, like, I still play this. And
I think it was a vocal minority more than anything else, to be honest. But they've got their numbers too.
Yeah,
Bungie is they've got their records and their numbers and the amount of stuff that's actually public that you can see, and then behind the scenes, the stuff that we don't even see through the API is insane with what they know. So they know their game, they know who's playing what, and all of that. They're making the right decisions.
Yeah. So then we get the Destiny 2 reveal. And then you and I get to go to the Destiny 2 review event in Seattle.
That was great.
We essentially got locked in a hotel room for 2.5 days. In a hotel, not a hotel room, like a hotel floor.
Yeah, the ballroom area. That was fun. It was interesting. There were a lot of questions at that time, and there were a lot of Destiny 2 was definitely simplified off the bat, and I think that was the biggest take, especially from us hardcore players, where we got into and started playing this game. We're like, this is really newcomer friendly, like really newcomer friendly,
casual,
and
friendly.
That's not a casual friendly is the biggest thing. And they changed a lot of systems for that almost hurt the people like us that played it day in, day out, and were grinding out a lot of stuff, and made it super casual. And that, I think, was the biggest argument at the time, was the casual players are not the ones who are supporting your game. The one who's popping in to play it, once a week, if even that, and are occasionally playing, and, will maybe drop it when the next game comes out. And when Destiny wasn't their preference of what they wanted to play, that's not the person supporting your game. But at the same time, they were still with Activision at the time. And I have a feeling that there were a lot of conversations that were going on back and forth between, okay, we need to make this as widely accessible as possible.
Well, and all that kind of stuff. Quote unquote support is a hard thing to say, though. It's like, because a player like you and I that maybe is continuing to play this every couple of days or multiple times a week, versus somebody that buys it in September and plays through the campaign and stops, they got the same amount of money from you as they did from that casual player as well. And they, and their goal is to, as a business, is just to sell as many copies of the game as possible. And again, Destiny 2 reviewed well. I gave it a high score for the campaign. The story had a good, solid beginning, middle, and end. Fighting Gaul had exactly what people wanted. They removed the
first 30 hours or so. Yeah, that game was great.
Yeah, they removed the RNG out of the weapons, and it was like, okay, so like if I got this weapon at level 21 and I had it, like it didn't matter anymore. Like I didn't have to, and then you just kept getting the same thing over and over and over again. And then
your 10th better devils.
Oh gosh, like some of the quotes, like you make that 10th better devils important. Well, you didn't make it important. And then there was multiple times where, as like, again, they came out with Destiny 2 and they said, okay, like in December we're going to give you Curse of Osiris, and in the spring we're going to give you Warmind. And they're like, people are like, oh wait, we're going back to this model? Like, because at that time we got Vanilla, Dark Below, House of Wolves, That was 1 year, and then Taken King was 1 year, and then the spring update was kind of free, and then Rise of Iron came out for year 3, and then we got like the Moments of Triumph and the Age of Triumph that came out at the end, where they brought those raids up that we didn't really talk about. We kind of glanced over that, but that made that springtime and that summertime fun to play Destiny, because they took everything from the last 2.5 years of Destiny and brought it up to the current level for you to earn stuff and to earn ornaments and to play the game. And then Destiny 2 came out, and like, in the argument could be made is like, you made Age of Triumph really cool because you wanted me to buy Destiny 2. Like, well, duh. it's a business. This model has started to set in of where, like, you get huge spikes in September and October. You get a little bit of lull, and then you get a little hump in December, and then maybe you get a little a small hump in April, but then May and June, you get a huge spike again, and as they're getting ready to bring something out new in September. And this has been an ebb and flow of how Destiny has operated over the last 6 years. And whether everybody likes it or doesn't like it, it's proven to be successful.
People keep playing, people keep buying it, people keep getting excited about it. Yeah, I mean, kind of, we can probably jump through some of this a little bit, but yeah, you get through Curse of Osiris and Warmind, which were once again thought of a little bit like House of Wolves and Dark Below, where
this is where like the end game problem came in, where you said like the first 30 hours of D2 was great, and like the story they told in Curse of Osiris was great. The story they told in Warmind was great. After that, it was like, okay, like, what are we supposed to? What do I do now? Why am I playing in January? Like, why am I going to sign on every other day? Like, because
the raids at the launch or year 1 of Destiny 2 as well. Leviathan, Eater of Worlds, Spire of Stars.
Same location, same themed, incomplete loot pools.
They also didn't tie in with the rest of the story.
They still
really
haven't
all that well. It's been kind of this bizarre side thing, and I think it's a big reason they're throwing Leviathan back in the content vault right now, is because they're not ready to do something with Callus quite yet. But yeah, it was this weird thing of like, you play through Curse of Osiris and then you go to Eater of Worlds and it didn't connect with anything. And that disconnect, I think, people want their theming to be the same with what they're doing. So when you play Warmind, you don't want to hop in Spire of Stars, which has nothing to do with the Warmind story. It's like, oh, by the way, here's a side mission from Leviathan and from the Red War that's still going on.
Well, and the problem was, I specifically remember having a text conversation with you, because you actually got to see Curse of Osiris early and I did not. And I remember having a conversation with you because at that point in time, you and I were having conversations about, we were worried about the longevity of Destiny. And you and I had a conversation of where you're like, dude, like, this DLC has to live in a bubble. Like, they have to, they have to look at it of like, if they're not going to buy Curse of Osiris. And this is when you had to go to Mercury. And if you didn't own it, like, you couldn't click on Mercury and go there. You could see it, but you couldn't go there. And same thing when they brought Mars back. Like, if you didn't own Warmind, you couldn't go there. And, go ahead.
That was something where the pay model, they were starting to run into that issue where suddenly your community is really divided, and you can't, not only is your community divided, but you can't meaningfully evolve the world. Curse of Osiris can't come in and change the tower, because some people might not have Curse of Osiris.
Osiris can't show up in the tower, because they'd already ran through that problem before, where like all of a sudden, like, Xur was selling a new weapon and you couldn't buy it because it was attached to an expansion in D1, or Eris is there and you can't talk to Eris because you don't own the expansion. Like, so they learned like some of that stuff, and that's why we got like the Reef in D1, and that's why we got the Iron Temple, of where like they wanted to tell a cool story, they wanted to introduce a new NPC, but they also had to respect the people that maybe didn't own it.
And it held back the game in a huge way, because again, you had these bubbles where the story can't meaningfully push forward, because Curse of Osiris has to, like you said, had to live in its own little bubble and couldn't affect the rest of the game, because some people might not buy Curse of Osiris.
So we went through the first year of D2, and it went through some struggles, and then they released, like, Warmind started shining some light on some cool stuff that they were trying to show, and then they introduced Forsaken. So they talked about making it
Taken King 2.0.
Yeah, Taken King 2.0, and they led with a jab to the heart of a lot of people when they're like, Cade's dead. And that's how they started the expansion.
So that was 2 years ago, a couple of days ago now, and I remember I missed it because I was at E3 that year. I was at the PlayStation press conference where they showed that first trailer.
Oh, we were moving.
But yeah, we were moving in the little Japanese garden area in between The Last of Us 2's church building and the Japanese garden. While on the stream, they were showing a whole bunch of other trailers and games and stuff while they were waiting for all the people who were actually on location to move into the next location, because that whole thing was just super bizarre and weird. But so I missed the trailer, and as I'm sitting there browsing Twitter to try and see what's going on, suddenly I'm seeing all these, Cade's dead. Cade, what? Cade's this. Cade's that. I'm like, what? Come on, I'm missing this. And I kind of like put some headphones in, I think, and watched the trailer really quickly while we were walking through there, because it had played just earlier. And yeah, that was shocking. That not only is that it wasn't a spoiler for the expansion, it was like, here's how we're starting this. This is the motivation behind this expansion. Cade's dying. Favorite character? Goodbye.
Yep. And so, I mean, and again, they told a great story, and with that story, they introduced the Tangled Shore, and they introduced Dreaming City to us, which were like a true, like it was touted as a true end game location. And I remember going to Dreaming City the first time and walking up and just getting smacked by a red bar and getting killed. And I'm like, oh boy.
And that was, again, the idea behind, if you look at the progress that has happened, Bungie experimenting with these new ideas and these new things and going, okay, Taken King 2.0, but hang on, hold my beer. We're going to do something else with this, and tried something new and really interesting. And that's what I've always loved with every new thing that they've put out, is I've really respected that ability to just go out on a limb, go outside of the box, try something new. And sometimes it falls flat, sometimes it doesn't, but it's just been this really cool idea. And that idea worked really well in Forsaken, having this whole secondary story open up with the Dreaming City.
Right. But we also were introduced to Gambit. Gambit came with Forsaken. I remember specifically you and I got to play it in June, and we both were like, okay, this is really cool. And in terms of like the PvE versus PvP aspect of it. And this is something that I've always tried to explain to people, because everybody's like, well, you liked Gambit. I'm like, the vacuum version of Gambit I got to play in the controlled environment that Bungie gave me to play it in, I enjoyed. That was before EP Shotgun was a thing, and all these other, these new supers were a thing, because they started introducing, different, I think with Forsaken, we got the new, like the third branch on the skill tree of each of the classes, to where like the Chaos Reach for the Warlock became a thing, and Spectral Blades for the Hunters became a thing. And so like those were all things that we weren't privy to at all. I mean, we were kind of privy to because we knew they were there, but we weren't seeing the build crafting that was being done around them and how Gambit would work and what it would or wouldn't be. So I remember you and I both came out of there like, okay, this stuff is really cool. And then a month and 6 weeks down the road, we're like, this is kind of grindy and rough. And
it's cool with what they hand you, like you said, in that controlled environment. They hand you a bunch of random weapons, some of which are garbage, some of which are cool and interesting and new. The problem is, and this happens with anything in Destiny, is a path of least resistance. Community figures out the meta,
500
and
people playing it versus 1 million people playing it.
Yeah, and 500 people playing it 1 or 2 matches each, and then moving on and going away, versus 1 million people playing it over and over and over again and figuring out all these little things to it. And suddenly when you stress the system that much, you can break it in ways that Bungie never anticipated. And so Gambit became, I think the issue with Gambit over time too became that it never really got supported in a big way, like a lot of new, even still, what we have 4 total Gambit maps right now
for Prime. For both. I think there's like 6 or 8 total, and for both of them.
And it hasn't been supported in a big way with a lot of additions to that mode. It's not been like Crucible, where every season comes with a new map or 2 or something like that. And People are finding their ways to cheese the boss, and it's fun to hop into every once in a while and do my weeklies on it, whatever. But I'm not invested in it anymore.
Yeah. So then this is also where they started introducing us to seasonal style content. So we had during this year, this year of Forsaken, we had Season of the Outlaw, Season of the Forge, Season of the Drifter, and Season of Opulence. And they were saying that these seasons are continuous of their evolving world, and you didn't necessarily if you only owned Forsaken, you would see like the impact of the seasons changing, and if you owned the expansions, the Forge, like I don't even remember because like this was so confusing to people because they're like, wait, it's a new season, like do I have to own Season of the Forge to play the Forge? But you can, like, and the give and pull on this was so confusing to people.
Even Bungie, I think, was confused at the time because they went into it with like, okay, well, these are all named. Each of the seasons were named. It wasn't Season of the whatever. It was like Black Armory, and what was Joker's Wild was the Drifter one, and then Penumbra, I think, was the Season of Opulence one. And by Season of Opulence, Black Armory was still Black Armory. Joker's Wild, they kind of started phasing it out. And then by the time they got to Season of Opulence, they'd completely dropped the fact that they had named it Penumbra a few months earlier. And we're like, okay, we're done with this, that we're just going to call it Season of whatever.
Yeah. So, and we got it, during the Season of the Forge, we got introduced to the Forges, to the weapon farming. We got in, Season of the Drifter, we got introduced to another version of Gambit, Gambit Prime, that, started like making a huge, again, was a reach for them of saying, okay, like we're going to try to base an entire season around one piece of content, and also around an armor build. And, and again, that fell flat, whether you like it or don't.
The having the loop idea was really cool, having to go into
Reckoning.
What was it? Reckoning. Yeah. And I ended up getting my Reckoner title, which was a slog and a grind. And it's one of my most proud titles at this point. But the idea behind the gameplay loop was really, really cool. But the problem is it wasn't supported long term. And so once they started to move past that with other stuff, once they started to introduce Season of Opulence, just nobody wanted to play it anymore. And I think that became one of the biggest problems was they instead of supporting older content, they started pushing newer stuff more and more and more. And so Gambit Prime and Reckoning kind of fell by the wayside. And didn't get the support that it needed to live long term.
Now, the only thing I will say is like the Armory content and the Season of the Drifter content played into this concept of like this goal that they had with Destiny of like continuing to move the story in a certain direction and showing the things and starting to tease certain things. Like during the Season of the Drifter, we had the Invitations of the Nine, where we started kind of learning like the Drifter can mess with darkness, and and so they were starting to tell this story. And then for whatever reason, for Season of Opulence, like, okay, back to the Leviathan. And it's like the content that they produced of a 6-player match-made activity where you could pick your loot. Like
it was really cool.
People loved it. Like they loved it. It had a glitch for like 10 days where you could just rain yourself in loot, and and the loop was there of
random
like, okay,
rolls, and
the gameplay loop was there of like they struck this balance of like, okay, I'm gonna go run more strikes so I can get more your runes, and I need more emeralds, and I'm gonna play Gambit because I need some more of that, and I'm gonna run these bounties that say to do play Crucible because I need more runes, and like so the loop aspect of like making all of the content relevant was like they hit it, but the problem was that they only hit it for like 3 months, and then during this 3 months we start hearing this rumbling of Activision and Bungie are going to get a divorce. Like, oh,
Well, I think that was even as far back as during Season of Drifter, or maybe even before, because it was January of that year that Bungie and Activision divorced.
Okay. But I mean, like, and we had heard like Bungie say that they weren't happy with the Forsaken or with the Yeah, with the Forsaken sales, like Activision came out on an earnings call and said it wasn't as highly touted as we thought it was going to be, and then Bungie came out and said we thought it sold great. Like, so this is where you started hearing, like, they kind of started jabbing at each other, and then like, I don't remember the exact time frame, but we heard the separation, and then we heard that like Vicarious Vision working on Season of Opulence was going to be the last thing that they were working on. They had previously done like Warmind, and I think they did almost all of Rise of Iron, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the huge things that was part of this this partnership with Activision. Was Activision has a lot of support studios. They've got High Moon, they've got Vicarious Visions, they've got all these support studios that help with Call of Duty and at the time Destiny. That really helped them push out a lot of this content. And suddenly Bungie's going, okay, we're divorcing Activision, we're taking full rights of Destiny, and this was, I remember it was January of 2018. Yeah, because it was right before Shadowkeep. January 2018, they're saying, or was that 2019? Geez, time is
20. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, of right before Shadowkeep, the year before, and they were basically saying like it was exciting and it was really cool. And a lot of people were like, wow, I wonder what they can do without Activision. And there was all this ideas that, it was Activision that was holding Bungie back. And I'm sitting here going, as somebody who's been in the industry, been covering the industry for a long time, I kind of give this little like side eye glance and go, you do realize the kind of support,
how much payroll Activision they just walked away from
gives Bungie. There's a lot of potential here, and I see the good in it, and I see why Bungie wants to go completely independent on it. But also, this is going to be hard for Bungie, and it was, and it has been. It's been very good as well, but I think a lot of people saw that Bungie suddenly wasn't this free flowing company who could do whatever the community wanted after that.
Yeah. So they come out and they say, okay, so here's our first fully self-published expansion, Destiny 2 Shadowkeep, going back to the moon. Moon's haunted, and we're introducing free-to-play model with cross-save.
That was huge. They changed again these yearly expansions, giving us kind of the really deep systemic at a core level changes to the game, where they're like, okay, we're changing the foundation of how the game works. Changing Shadowkeep to be, Shadowkeep itself wasn't free to play, but basically saying, okay, Destiny 2 vanilla entirely free to play. We're going to give you access to all these locations. Suddenly that opens them up to go to be able to update and change the world regardless of if you own the expansions or not, because suddenly they can make all these changes, because they say Destiny lives at this point in time, period. That's it. So if we want to change the tower and do something to the tower and you haven't bought into Forsaken or Shadowkeep, too bad, because this is the point of time that Destiny is in right now.
Well, they split at this point in time, they, in my opinion, they split their game in 3 different directions. So the first direction is free to play. Pick it up, any system you want, play it, play with your friends, be 750 power, jump in, do what you want. It's free. It's Crucible, Gambit, Strikes, story stuff, like our destinations.
Patrol the planets.
Yeah, go ahead and do it. Then they're like, okay, then the next layer they introduce on top of that is we have seasonal content. We have seasonal activities that are going to be around for 3 months for a season. They're going to have its own loot. You can buy the season, and the seasons cost $10, and there's a battle pass style system associated with them for you to earn items in the game by playing the game. And then the third layer they added on top of that is, if you want a little bit more, here's a brand new destination, brand new story missions, brand new raid that you can go play. Called this content is called Shadowkeep.
And then kind of the bundles too, where if you bought Shadowkeep, you get whatever season it currently is with Shadowkeep, or the Shadowkeep plus yearly season, so you get Shadowkeep plus the next 4 seasons, and kind of semi-complicating things there. But I think they did it in a way that was a lot better than it had previously been, and had not divided the community quite as much. And I didn't hear a lot of complaints over this last year about necessarily the community divisions.
Hmm.
So I think that was nice.
And the biggest thing with like the $10 seasons is like there's definitely more than like $10 worth of content in there, just alone from the stuff that you can earn by playing the game. Like as you level up, and you every time you would level up, you get a different item from your battle pass, and you'd also be able to claim items off the free track, which is spread out over like 7 or 8 different levels of rewards. So there was, and they had put a lot of stuff. They took stuff out of the store and put it in the battle pass. For you to earn, and you couldn't get that. Like they started this, if you don't live in this time frame and you want that helmet ornament or whatever, like you can't get it. Like you have to get the battle pass. It's not something you can even just go to the store and give them $8 and pay for. Like you need to be here during this time frame, and if you're not here during this time frame and you choose not to support us during that, that's fine. You won't be punished for that, but you won't be able to get the stuff.
Yeah.
Which
started that FOMO type feeling with cosmetic content as well as the actual gameplay content as well. You had
Vex Offensive.
Vex Offensive was kind of the first big one that was like, hey, this is here. Guess what? It's going away in 3 months. And everybody was like, what? There's an activity that's not going to be here anymore?
Yeah. And then they also started like the living world, where you started seeing essentially our impactor of Vex Offensive affecting something in the tower. You started seeing like a gate being built behind Ikora, similar to when we moved on to the Season of the Dawn, where we were building towards something, and we were donating Fractaline and building a beacon to light the lighthouse to bring Trials back, and then all of a sudden Saint 14
rescue Saint 14.
Yeah, Saint 14's in the tower, and again, like that season came out, and it was a $10 upgrade again for the battle pass, and you got 3 or 4 story missions that were really cool, like getting to see that stuff and tying that stuff all the way back to Curse of Osiris. Like that was a really good job.
The other thing I think was really cool about it, and this is really divisive, a lot of people don't like it, but I think it was really cool, is kind of drawing this stuff out over time was really cool too, because it starts to create Destiny as again this game that is taking place at a certain point in time and almost in real time with the players. So instead of dropping a chunk of content at the start of the season that you can just burn through in a week and then for the rest of the season you're done with, start of the season there's a story mission and you can play it, and like, oh well, you're done with the story mission, well Osiris has to do some more research, and when he's done with his research and done doing something, a gate opens back up and you can go back into it again to try and rescue Saint 14 a few weeks later. I thought that model and that kind of continuing model, how they keep on doing things, is a really interesting idea of making me feel like this game is progressing and living with me.
It's kind of like watching a TV show a little bit, where you're like, I got to come back in next week, Yeah,
but I'm also the player that plays constantly. I play every week. I check all the new stuff that's coming out, and I play every week. So I think there's a balance they need to strike with that, with somebody who might miss a few weeks and does want to come in and suddenly do all that later, and having that still be available, which seems like they're working towards with next year, versus somebody like me who wants to play it week by week and see new evolving stuff week after week happening.
Yeah, so like we got Vex Offensive, we got Sundial. These were all like kind of like improvements, quote unquote improvements or changes to the Menagerie style system that was working. There were 6-player match-made activities. And then after Sundial, so we got Season of the Worthy, and this is where we started seeing like I feel like you started seeing the effects of like work from home and COVID having an effect on things, because Season of the Worthy went like the public event style of the Seraph Tower public events, and and this season was full of a lot of glitches, like a lot of issues and a lot of bugs, and
it was grindy too. It was bounty central, going back to where I said what now an hour ago, where I was like, oh, bounties, how ironic, and we're getting to that. It was so bounty heavy and reliant on doing these bounties, and the Seraph Tower public events were, I mean, the patrol matchmaking is not great in Destiny, and I was actually playing earlier today, even with the contact event, the patrol matchmaking has not been fantastic in getting me a decent group of people, but especially with Seraph Tower, And when they evolved to be like the more difficult version of the Seraph Tower, matchmaking was terrible and it was so hard. And I ended up having to switch to play on PC just to complete my flawless run, because I wasn't even getting enough people to finish the event on PS4 ever.
And at least on PC, like they had the text chat ability for you to communicate locally, so you can find out if people are trying to do this. Like, and again, it's just a small. Like I did the same thing. Like in order for me to get my almighty title, I've made the switch over to playing a little bit more on PC, and just the fact that the game just runs so much better.
yeah, which
so
I mean,
much better.
PS5, 60, 4K.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
So and then we got Season of Arrival, which is what where we're currently at now. And then with Season of Arrival, we didn't know anything. Like they weren't saying anything. Like usually,
which I loved.
Yeah,
I was so overjoyed with that, because I am the type of person. Remember back to, if we jump back to Season of Dawn here, or no, it was Season of Undying. Where we had the final offensive, and they marked that on the calendar and it was on the roadmap, and everybody's like, all right, we're going into the final offensive. It's going to be awesome. It's, we're going to fight the Undying Mind. And it was literally the same event. And we just got to the end of it, and it's the Undying Mind doing the same thing that the last boss did. It's just slightly different because it has a few shields rotating around it. And no new loot, no new nothing. I was like, why did you put this on the calendar as this massive, massive event when all you did was palette swap the boss? And so I think from there on out, I and many others wrote pieces and talked in podcasts and on their respective streams and everything about how bad that was. And they started moving back to the mystery, moving into Dawn and then Worthy, and then Arrival's full-on mystery. They were like, by the way, you don't even know what the season's called until an hour before it drops.
Yeah. So the day that the season dropped, the Bungie came out and so we knew that they dated it, and they said, hey, we're gonna have our reveal, the future of Destiny. So they reveal Destiny 2 Beyond Light, coming September 22nd, and then they do named expansions for 2021 and 2022. Granted, the 2022 one is a working title, but like the
working title.
Yeah, the Witch Queen is 2021, and then I don't remember. Lightfall is 2022, but Lightfall is the working title. And then they start talking about there's going to be a new element and subclass being introduced called Stasis, where essentially they're telling us that we're going to be able to wield the power of the darkness that we're going to learn about on Europa.
The impression that I got from that too is the way they've been talking about it. Stasis is the first of multiple darkness-based powers that we'll get over time. So I would almost expect with the other expansions that we may get, Stasis is like equivalent to Solar on the light side, and then with another expansion we get something that's the equivalent of, or not equivalent, but we get multiple.
Eventually we'll have we'll have 6 elements
total. Yeah.
Which will be very interesting to see if they can pull that off, because that makes a lot of big choices. And so
balancing and
and then they kind of show that, and they bring the Stranger back, which Luke Smith had said, like the Strangers. They start talking. I kind of lost my train of thought, but they start talking about
Stranger. You're talking Stranger.
So they they say that the Stranger's back. So the trailer starts with the Stranger meeting with Drifter and Eris about, this is why I brought you here. There's a ship on the ground, and things like that are happening. And the first thing that I noticed, and a lot of people talked about, is that the Stranger who Luke Smith had come out and said, we're done. Like it's over.
Done with their story.
And she
there was some stuff in Warmind that like, oh, the Stranger might be or maybe that was Season of something.
They think that it's Anna Bray's sister.
Elsie Bray.
Yeah. So
so that was all hinted at, but yeah, as far as Bungie was concerned and Luke was concerned, we're done with Stranger. D1 vanilla character that hadn't been seen since.
Yeah, and they had already talked, like in D1 they talked about the darkness and all that stuff, and they kind of initially at the beginning of D2 said that they were done with the darkness and they had moved on. And then at the end of D2's campaign you saw like the first glimpse at the pyramid ships, and then they started like telling the story of like, okay, when when the traveler awakens, you can't have light without dark. The yin and yang conversation of, because the traveler's awake now and the traveler awaking, it made it aware. It made the darkness aware that, okay, hey, we need to come back to fix whatever, to bring balance to the world. And
what's great about this too is you can now tie it back to Vanilla Destiny. They were setting this up because if you watch the conclusion of Vanilla Destiny, where the light explodes out from the traveler, it goes across each of the planets that
Vanilla Destiny 2.
Vanilla Destiny 2, sorry. Where it goes across each of the planets that became each of the expansions over time, and then the very final scene was the silhouettes of these pyramid ships waking up, and suddenly everybody's like, oh, pyramid ships, I know what those are. That's the darkness. We're getting the darkness. And that was, that was 2.5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And we are now just seeing that come to fruition, which is, that's a long haul. That is a lot of investment that you've got to have in a game, kind of tying back to what we were initially talking about, where console players had not been used to having this kind of strong investment in a game over this period of time.
Well, yeah, for sure. Because I remember playing with some people that would hop into Destiny and hop out and hop in. And, like, we're just in the tower. They're picking things up. They're looking at their gear. We're having a conversation, and I still remember one of my, he doesn't play it anymore, but he's like, dude, are we playing the same game? Because he's like, the things that you have in your head of what, like what you're talking about, I don't understand where those are coming from. Like I don't feel like we're playing the same game, and it's either from reading lore or like really reading each of the cards that, when you go to the quest and, kind of reading through it, or watching somebody on YouTube, or, talking about certain things of like, just things that, people do in their downtime. But he would like, I don't feel like we're playing the same game. Cause like, people, there's speculation that, Osiris is supposed to replace the speaker, and he was set to be like the heir to the speaker before he had the problems that he had in the game, or that with the, him going crazy with
the Vanguard.
Yeah. So like there was, and the people are like, are you, like, how are we playing the same game? Like, I'm not getting what you're getting out of it. And it's just like,
well, and it's interesting too. You play through strikes, or you play through even like a public event. You get to this most recent Contact public event, and I wonder, asking people who are playing the game, how many people, if you said, "Okay, do you understand what we're doing here? What we're actually doing with this event? What's going on when the bank is transmatting in, and when we're doing this thing and collecting these motes and the blooms and everything? Do you actually understand what's going on, or are you just going with the motions?" And it's not wrong to go with the motions, absolutely. People have fun playing this game, but like you said, are we playing the same game? It's this very interesting where I play it and I see these implications of, okay, that's a pyramid scale, so that is a piece of the darkness that's coming off, and the Taken and Savathun are kind of trying to take over it, and we're trying to do a lot of things with the Drifter, who's also doing his own thing and siphoning off the darkness. And but most people are like, all right, I just want to play through this, complete it.
I'm playing Gambit in a public event. So.
Yep. It's just PvE Gambit. That's it.
So some of the things that have kind of showed up in chat, like during that trailer for Beyond Light, though, like they showed the Stranger and they showed this thing above her in the same aspect of a ghost. And Luke Smith has came out and said that is not a ghost.
Confirmed it's not a ghost. Did you watch that interview with it was Dr. Lupo?
I watched bits and pieces of it. I don't think I saw the whole thing, but he's like, it's something we might look into later,
Yeah, he was like, will Guardians get that? And he was like, we'll see.
Yeah, because the Exo Stranger is not a light bearing Guardian.
Nope. So that's been established since Vanilla D1. Is she was not born in light, period. Yep.
So
whatever that means.
Yeah. So they've said that like that's not a ghost, and there's this threat going on. So, but at the same time, when they're telling this cool story, and they're pulling on the strings of everybody of like, okay, here's the darkness, here's the Stranger, here's Eris, here's Drifter, here's a new location that we've been teasing and showing in artwork for years. So here's Europa, and and then we're also gonna
Deepstone Crypt.
Yeah. Yep. Like for a raid location, and then we're also gonna. We're still trying to flesh out to the new players and help the new players understand what they're doing. So in order to do that, we're bringing parts of the Cosmodrome back, and
and ditching other content.
Yeah, and we're putting some other stuff away, and they kind of just said that, and then like in my Discord, like I didn't realize that this had posted because they did this reveal, and they're like, okay, go play the new season, and it's like, huh? You know, because
and it's live now. Here's a trailer. Go play it.
Yeah. And here's a highlight level activity that most of you aren't going to be able to do, and we're going to release it tonight. You know, and which is great. Like those are, you know, something to strive for and something that surprised people that they didn't know was going to be there. Cool. Like kudos. Like I love the concept of it. I still haven't been able to do the new dungeon yet, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I haven't done it either. I've seen quick glimpses like on Twitter and stuff. I want to go in mostly blind, but the quick glimpses that I've seen, it looks really, really cool. It looks really wild.
And so like why they're teasing all that stuff, you know, they're showing this thing, and then this article post on Bungie.net where they're like, Mars, Mercury, Io, Titan, and Leviathan are all going away.
Goodbye.
We're putting them in the vault, and they pretty much came out and said, this game is too big for us to deal with. And I saw a stat the other day. Go ahead.
File size, and just in terms of, you know, getting people to all go into the same location. You've got things like flashpoints that try and push people to the same location. But when you've got that many things that players can all be doing separately, yeah, it's a lot.
So I saw some, I don't remember where I saw it or where I heard it, but there was some data that said, like, it just as an example, just to give people an idea, the Warmind campaign and Mars itself, I believe, took up 5 to 7% of Destiny's file size. 0.03% of that was being played.
Yeah. Which is like, why is this taking up, you know, anywhere from 5 to 7% of the file of the space on our hard drive that is adding to, you know, at this point is, I think, the second largest game on my hard drive next to Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which is that game's just enormous. But why is this content that nobody's playing, and that Bungie is not supporting for good reason? They've got a small limited team. They can only support and do so much with each of these individual planets. But if nobody's going there because Bungie's not putting activities there, then why should they continue to have these locations in the game?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I'm okay with it because I think, like, again, like, streamlining stuff and compacting things is a good idea. Like, and then, you know, like, I feel like people have gotten their value out of it. I am curious and worried, like, what the free-to-play player experience is going to be like for a brand new player of, like, these destinations that played an implemental part of the game. But I don't feel like from a free-to-player standpoint that they care about the Red War anymore.
Yeah, that's an interesting, it's more of a philosophical thing than anything else, where you ask, like, oh, what about the Red War? Nobody can play the Red War now. And it's like, well, does anybody want to play the Red War? Does
the Red War have an impact on anything that we're trying to do right now with their seasonal content? And the answer to that is no.
Yeah, when you're trying to create a live, ongoing, evolving game, yeah, sorry, you missed the Red War. It was there. You can read about it. You can, you know, and maybe that's a thing where they can have some dialogue or something for these characters that, you know, a new player comes in with Beyond Light, and there's some dialogue where Zavala regales them over what's happened over the last 3 years, you know, briefly or something. But other than that, did people really want to play through it? Is that why they're really joining Destiny in the first place? I would argue no. You know, the ongoing community, you and me, we're not going back and playing the Red War. I haven't played it again. And if Destiny is to exist within a certain point of time, if Destiny exists now as it is, with, you know, the chunk missing from the tower now because of the Almighty crashing, you know, piece crashing into it and all that, it exists right now. So the Red War it's done. It's over. It happened. It was a thing back then. And the community has moved on, and new Guardians that are joining within even the lore of Destiny. If a new Guardian was rezzed right now by a ghost and they're like, oh, I'm a Guardian, I'm coming to help out with this ongoing campaign of everything that's going on, they wouldn't play the Red War. They wouldn't be a part of it. They're not a part of it. And I think the free-to-play model helps them get over the hurdle of people saying, oh, oh, you're taking away content that we paid for. And it's like, they've made very clear that any content that they take away, they're going to make free beforehand.
Right.
So everything that they're taking away now is from year one, which was made all part of the free to play model beforehand, and they've given people ample chance to play all that stuff. And then even with the current,
and even okay, just to be clear, like that data is still showing that even when it's free to go there, free to go to Mars, 0.03% of the population is going to Mars.
like nobody is going back to play the old Warmind campaign. They've all moved on. They're interested in what's going on now. What was going on in Season of the Worthy with Rasputin and what he was doing. Nobody wants to play the original, oh, we got to take out Zol, we got to take out Nokris, because now there's some really interesting new stuff with, oh, Nokris is still alive. That's really interesting. And yeah, even to an extent, playing these kinds of things in strikes to me is a little bit like, wow, I feel like I'm going really back here, and I don't want to actually play it. So for me, taking it away, it's kind of nice that they're giving like Io and Titan a last hurrah with the contact events and giving you an opportunity to play there.
I think all this stuff is getting a last hurrah.
Yeah, at the very least, we know the contact events will be on Io and Titan for sure. The last couple of seasons, we did a lot of Mercury stuff with Dawn. We did a lot of Mars stuff with Worthy and heading there. And so they're giving it a last hurrah. And then the opportunity, too, to take some of these characters that have not been explored a lot, where you have Asher Mir sitting on Io doing nothing. You have Sloan sitting on Titan doing nothing. You take these locations out of the game, and suddenly Bungie is free to play with those characters however they
bring
want
them to the tower.
Yeah, bring them somewhere, bring them into the story, have them be doing something, interesting, because suddenly you can evolve that, you can change that, you can have those characters be doing something else. And there's a lot of opportunity behind taking those locations away. And even if they don't fully destroy them, which I have a hint, if they're bringing contact locations to both Io and Titan, they may in lore be like, oh, okay, the pyramids have taken these over and practically destroyed them, and Guardians can't go there anymore.
They're going to be banned from being traveled to or something.
Yeah, they have these opportunities to really do cool things with moving the world state forward in interesting ways that we haven't really gotten until now.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's definitely like their marketing team, whether it's through Activision or through Bungie, like their ability to produce a trailer, talk about what's coming, show show what they need to show. Like Mark Noseworthy, Luke Smith, they know what they're doing. Like they've built very solid content. I'm a little concerned that Chris Barrett's not working on Destiny anymore. He's working on their new IP. That's a little concerning to me. Chris Barrett was a huge implemental part of that. I am concerned about some of the talent that Bungie has lost, let alone with their split from Activision and from people that have left Bungie in general.
However, I will call out Joe Blackburn is back.
Yeah, the raid designer.
That's very promising for raids.
Yeah. So and the raids have always been some solid content. Leviathans were maybe the low point, but like Last Wish that we didn't really talk about that too much. Like that was a monumental raid, a very cool raid. We didn't spend too much time talking about, or any time talking about Garden of Salvation. That's an amazing raid that has a huge tie to Destiny 1 in terms of like just the vault style feeling and the and where you're going and what you're doing. All of those, those are some of the best content and the best encounters that the team gets to design, and to where you truly see your build crafting have an effect on there. We didn't even I think Chandler and I could go for hours on this kind of stuff. Like
absolutely, I could talk I'm in a Discord with my actual Destiny raid group and crew that we played normally with, and we're constantly talking about things. And this is something that we're talking about weekly, as new stuff pops up. And whether it's gameplay stuff or lore stuff or whatever, this is something absolutely we can talk hours and hours and hours on.
The last couple things I want to touch on, because this is probably one of the longest episodes we've had in a long time, is so like the changes that they're talking about, the seasonal content that they've came out and said that like, okay, we don't want it to just be about bounties, that they're trying to do like quests and and things that are like significant chunks to XP to helping you level the battle pass up, because the way that people feel right now is that the only way to level the battle pass up is to do bounties, which it kind of is. What are you thinking that their aspect to this, their changes to this could be next season with Beyond Light?
Ideally what I would want to see is completion of content being the really big chunks of experience, and bounties being more of like bonus experience, to where I don't feel like I absolutely need to do them. Where if I complete a strike, if I finish it, if I complete a Crucible match, maybe give me a higher amount of XP for winning, to kind of give me a bonus for, or an incentive to win Crucible or Gambit or something. Give me a higher amount of XP dependent on if I go into a Nightfall and get like a certain score, so I can aim for certain scores. Start putting your eggs in that basket, where you're incentivizing one, completion of the content. Because right now what we're seeing with the forges, where there's that cheese, Path of Least Resistance, where people are just AFKing the forges to get all the Umbral engrams to power up. I think I'm still only light 1013 or something right now, and all these people are already 1060 because they've hopped into forges. I saw a stat today, I think was 63% of the completed activities in Destiny 2 over the last 24 hours, this was earlier today, were AFK forges, were incomplete forges. 63% of the activities in Destiny 2, incomplete forges, because people are leaning on that Path of Least Resistance to go just level up as fast as they can. And
it's because I think a lot of it has to do with because they see something cool, like the dungeon, which is a level 1040 thing, and the entitlement of the player base of like, well, I should just be able to do that now. And like, you can, if you're willing to go get your butt kicked, or you can play the game. And that's the balance that they've never been able to strike, though, because it's like, okay, here's brand new stuff. And like, I think I'm like 1024, 1027. And I mean, I've only focused on one character. I have done like a minute bit of AFK forging, but it's probably only giving me like 1 or 2 points in light. I'm actually more doing it for the material, like down the road, so that I have the material. Yeah. So like, I'm not doing it to level myself. I'm not doing it to do the dungeon. It's just
I'm not going to claim innocence here either. I've definitely, I haven't done it this particular go around, but I've definitely done my fair share of easy farming for stuff.
Yeah. So, but I think that they show something cool, and you can't get to there, and the only way to get there is to kind of and this would be something I would love to see somehow fix, and I don't know the answer to it. Of like, okay, you need to figure out a way to balance these items out, whether that's through rewards, post activity rewards that are leveling you, like they did that like back with like Season of the Drifter, where it's like you complete these certain tasks, you're at a high enough level to do the cool activity, or Season of Opulence. And like now it's like once you complete that an introductory quest line to Season of the Arrival, and even if you're like a light level like 1,000 player like I was, like I still wasn't high enough to go into the dungeon that you released 8 hours later.
And I think that it's cool and it's exciting that you've suddenly released this dungeon. I like the delays. Again, I'm that type of person that I like somewhat of the time gates, because they can offer that really interesting dynamic of, okay, I have a week and a half to level up. Where I'm watching pop-ups from my Discord group right now, who like they're all debating what to play. Like, oh, do we want to go through a Garden of Salvation run to try and level up, to try and get all this stuff done? And I really want to get to the raid. I want to get to it as soon as, or the dungeon. I want to get to it as soon as possible. Where if we'd pushed it out a week and a half, where say it wasn't coming out until next weekend or something, or even this weekend, maybe it just released today, people wouldn't feel the need to
rush.
rush and do these cheese methods to get up as quickly as possible. And that's what I'd like to see. Your question was looking at Beyond Light and how they fix the dynamic of XP and progression through bounties. Give us more progression for actually completing things. Make it feel meaningful for me to get to the end of a Crucible match. Make it feel meaningful for me to get to that final score screen on a strike, because right now going through strikes is just going through the motions.
I would love to see like a weekly quest system in place of like rewarding you for doing your milestones or your powerful drops. And upon completion of that, like, okay, so let's just say your season is going to last 12 weeks and you have a 100 level system. So maybe completing that quest is worth 10 levels or 12 levels of your pass. Like to where, versus now you could not touch the milestone system, not touch the power system, go and run a lost sector for 12 hours and be level 100. You could. And what I'm saying though, is like, it'd be something like to incentivize, like, cause like, like at a certain point in time when your power level is at a high enough point, or were you grounded correctly? Like, are you still like 3 weeks ago, were you still did you care where the flashpoint was?
Absolutely not. No, I wasn't doing flashpoints.
Would you care where the flashpoint was if you were level 94 in your battle pass and it was a guaranteed 3 levels?
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at that, and
that's what I would love to see. Completing a powerful reward is 4 levels.
So you're talking about it from more of a strictly level perspective as opposed to something like the experience points, because it does give you experience, but it's not a huge chunk of experience.
You don't get as much experience for playing 1 Crucible match as you do for completing 2 Crucible bounties. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head right now, but if you complete your weekly Crucible bounty, which if you're a really good Crucible player, you might be able to complete it in 2 matches.
1 or 2 matches
and then,
easily.
But your powerful drop is 4 matches. Your milestone, your gold star is 4 matches. I would love to see something on top of, like if you're going to continue to drip the content, like tie the story missions into that quest of like go to Europa and complete, blah, 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 blah. Or this season, go and do, you do your contact event, and you get a powerful drop for that. And then do your next event. And you get a powerful drop for that, and to see how that would function in terms of, because I would love to see the 2 things tying together better, of the battle pass and playing the game and leveling at the same time, because to reward you for your powerful drop significantly.
Yeah, there needs to be more incentive to complete the content, period. That's what it needs to be, is not this bounty system. The bounties need to be bonus. Bounties need to be the cherry on top. It needs to be the little stuff where a player like me, yes, absolutely, no matter what, I'm going to go in, I'm going to pick up all my bounties, I'm going to complete them all,
because we're programmed to do it from 6 years of playing the game.
Yeah, but it needs to be where it's going to give me a little bit of a bonus, but it's not going to give me a significant bonus over somebody who says, you know what, screw it, I just want to go in and play Crucible, I just want to go in and play strikes without going through and picking up all these bounties and doing all these things. Bounties should be a bonus. It should be the dressing on top rather than the core thing that everybody needs to complete and go for.
Yeah, I would love to see something. They came out and said like, oh, if you played 3 strikes a day, like when they first introduced the battle pass system, they said something. If you're playing 3 strikes a day and you grab the associated bounties, you can go up a level a day. I want them to come out and say, if you complete this quest, and like again, don't make the quest disappear, which it sounds like they're already saying that they're not going to do. But here's a quest that can be completed 12 times, like once per week over the 12 weeks of the season. If you complete this quest all 12 times, you're guaranteed to be 100 by the time that you've done it. And that inside that quest would be complete 4 Crucible matches, complete 3 Gambit matches, do your flashpoint, all that, and at the same time,
all of your milestones for that individual week. Yeah.
And like maybe it some type of cross progression, but that way it's like it's and then if you don't, but at the same time, if you don't want to play that way, like if you're a Gambit player and you enjoy playing Gambit, give them a chunk of experience for completing a Gambit match, let them keep doing the repeatable bounties, let them keep earning the bright dust, and they can get to 100 that way if they want to. But here's the other way that you don't ever have to go to the tower and pick up a bounty. You can log into Destiny, fly right to a gold star, do it, check that gold star off on Tuesday, sign in on Wednesday, fly to the other destination, check that gold star off on Thursday, fly in on Friday, check that gold star off, and you do those things, you'll be level 100.
Yeah. I mean that system sounds great. I think they've definitely, as they've introduced more seasonal content, they've dropped a focus on ways to complete the ritual activities. And even this season doesn't have a ritual weapon. It doesn't have any reason to grind out. And I know they're not going to change a lot of these things until Beyond Light, so I'm not criticizing them necessarily for it. It's a lot of testing and everything that needs to go in place beforehand. But Season of Arrivals doesn't have reasons to complete Strikes, Gambit, Crucible, other than just that programming that's 6 years of us just going, okay, it's reset day, I need to go do my things.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
All right, so we're going to take a question from Michael. Actually, you know what? Hang on. So Matt the Low on the chat writes, Cade 6 never slept. Uldren now sleeps in the back alley in the tower. Definitely needs some new accommodation options. Who will/should be the new Hunter Vanguard?
I'm going to say I don't think there will be one. I think they're setting this up to where the Vanguard is fractured. I saw a really interesting picture the other day of like Ikora and Zavala stand there. There were some similar shots over the course of the seasons of each of them standing in a unique way that shows like this division in the Vanguard. Vanguard's broken. And I think the fracturing of the Vanguard really started happening with not even Cade 6 death, actually the speaker's death and never replacing the speaker. And then Cade 6, and then so we're seeing a fracturing of the Vanguard as it stands. Would I love to see Uldren come back and be the Hunter Vanguard, and that would be a really interesting story development? Yeah, that'd be interesting. But I think the dynamic is changing so much that the Vanguard as a whole just, it's done. It's not important anymore. It's fractured. And unless we see a massive resurgence and repair and everything of the Vanguard, I don't think we'll actually get a new Hunter Vanguard.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. Like, I would love to see them. They're obviously planning something cool for Uldren. When that'll be, like, we have no idea. Like, we talked about when Oryx came and Taken King, when Oryx came. At the very beginning, we went to, I can't even remember the name of the moon right now. We only went there for one story mission. Yeah, Phobos. Yeah. We went there for one story mission because there was a distress signal. The Cabal had sent out a distress signal from Phobos, and that's why we went there. That distress signal was then later answered by Gaul and the Red and the Red Legion. And when he got there, he saw what he thought was the Guardians destroying everything. That hence kicked off the campaign for D2. So it would be very interesting to see, like, the obviously this Uldren thing that showed up during the Forsaken campaign, weeks after we completed the campaign, it'll be very fascinating to see. And if you don't think that Mara Sov as the queen, who's the queen of the Awoken, is going to play any role on Europa, you're crazy.
Yeah, you've got Eris there. You've got. And speaking of, I mean, Eris and Drifter, the dynamic between the two of them that we're already starting to see through like the contact events and stuff is so cool. I'm loving the story development where it's not just one person talking to us anymore, and we get this really interesting back and forth between Eris and Drifter. It's awesome.
And then, so I think Michael's having a little bit of fun, but it's still a cool question. So Michael asks, is Destiny like good again? Was it ever good? Save this question for the end of the show. Take like 10 minutes to state your case for or against it. So again, Michael played Destiny at launch, D1. He actually raided with us, and I believe that we completed the Vault of Glass. And he's like, I don't like this. But he can't really say anything because he's played Overwatch just as long.
So ironically, it's really funny because my wife was the same way, where we bought her own PS4 specifically for Destiny 1. We got her the Glacier White Destiny 1 edition PS4, which is still the one she's running. And she played a little bit of D2 at the start, but she kind of fell off of that, and she's been heavy into Overwatch. Same sort of thing where she can't take the grind, she can't take the grinding for weapons and re-rolling everything and trying to get random rolls and all that stuff. She just wants to play, and I get that. It's cool. Is Destiny good again? Was it ever good? Whew.
So I think gameplay wise and first person shooter wise, there is nothing on par with this game at all. It is the best mechanical shooter I have ever played.
Yep. The verticality of it, the way that the shooting works, the way that the function, like Bungie is just absolutely on point, top of their game when it comes to, that's why Halo was the first person shooter and why everybody was targeting making a Halo killer.
And that's why I almost don't care about whatever this new IP is or isn't going to be. I'm probably going to try it no matter what because of their gameplay mechanics.
It's Bungie. Yeah. They're going to experiment with it. It's going to be interesting. Will it be perfect? Probably not, but will it be experimental and interesting and really pushing the boundaries of what they can do next? I believe so. Absolutely. So is Destiny good again? Yes, I think it's getting there. I think we're on the upswing again. I think we're, especially for players that have been through this cycle again and again and again, we're back on the Taken King, the Forsaken side of things with Beyond Light coming up. But we're also seeing some really interesting continuing evolutions of every time they do that. You know, Forsaken evolved a lot of stuff off of the ideas of Taken King. Beyond Light is going to evolve a lot of things off the ideas of Forsaken, and what they're doing with pushing that forward and announcing 3 back-to-back expansions over the next 3 years. That is some strong support that they're putting into this game, saying, okay, this is what we're doing.
And they're not saying Destiny 3. Like specifically, they said no. Like as of now, there are no plans for Destiny 3. So is it good again? Yes, I feel like it's in a state where it can be good again. What I need them to do at this point in time is I need them to decide and to publicly say what they want it to be. If they want it to be a game that you play from September to November and then maybe trickle in some seasonal content that might draw your attention, I'm fine with that. If they can figure out a way to not punish people, like if somebody picks the game up in September and puts it down at Thanksgiving and doesn't pick it up again until next September, I want that player to not feel punished.
Mm-hmm.
And if
there's a lot of people who, when the reveals were happening, I was seeing people on Twitter popping up saying, oh man, Destiny's looking really interesting again, but I haven't played it in a year and a half. I'm really nervous about hopping in. I think I'm missing a lot. And that is the downside of not coming in with a Destiny 3. Coming in with expansions, you inherently feel behind.
But if they did a Destiny 3, they would have to blow it up again.
And that's the downside of Destiny 3, which I'm happy with the current model that they're going for. Yeah. I think it's great. The sunsetting of weapons progressively off of each season.
I'm already seeing some like I've been talking to some friends that were talking about this earlier, and I didn't think they were going to do it, but I'm already seeing some concerns and some cracks in that facade of where, like, you look now, like that Bad Omens rocket launcher that Drifter's selling now has a Season of Arrival logo on it. And, you know, does that mean that I have to infuse my one that doesn't have the Season of Arrival logo on it into that one to make that relevant? You know, or are you going to, in 6 months, show me another spare ration that I have to grind for, or another, you know, whatever it's going to be? And, you know, I hope that I'm okay with a little bit of those weapons being, you know, trickled in there. But like, you know, like a guy, Gus, I play the game with on a pretty regular basis. He goes, if I got a God roll gnawing hunger back in the day from Reckoning that I love, and now I have to hope that I get the same roll from engrams that I'm turning in for these Umbral engrams, because if I want to use that in a raid in 4 months, like there's some serious questions they have to answer with that. I'm 100% for new weapons, new perks, cool things, not having to balance every encounter around Recluse and, you know, and all this stuff. Like, I get all of that. Like, and I'm down for it, but don't put Recluse back in the loot pool in 8 months and make me do the same quest that I did 2 years ago to get it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Bad Omens too, and the ridiculous thing about that, literally, I just did it today, where I see that new Bad Omens, and I like Bad Omens as a rocket launcher. It's one of my go-to rocket launchers that I regularly use. and I'm looking at my old one and I'm looking at my new one and the power disparity between them. And I go, well, okay, I'll just buy this new one and I'll infuse my old one into it. And that's what's dumb there is it's not even one that I have to grind for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to grind for a new one and get that roll again. I can instantly buy it from Drifter and then infuse my old one into it, or just delete my old one if it's not as high level as that new one.
But you're not doing anything like that.
But I'm not doing anything for it. Exactly.
You're protecting yourself from it being sunset, because the same gun with the same perks and the same roll that came out 2 years ago now will be irrelevant in September. But this other one that's got a shiny different logo in the corner, won't be.
So my question is, why isn't the one that I had, which has my kill counter on it too? That's the other thing that's really interesting. That's
what he's saying. He's like, I should be able to take something and put it into that one that makes that logo change, but I get to keep everything that I'm attached to it with it.
Mm-hmm.
They attach this system of masterworking and having a kill counter and stuff like that, and then they're like, well, yeah, but we're gonna sunset it, but we're gonna give you the option to buy this other one. Like, I don't understand it. It's the same problem I have with the Pinnacle system. Like, the Pinnacle system should be, in my opinion, and I know that we just talked about too many materials being added, but you complete an activity. Instead of you, and like, this is a little bit of RNG protection, but I think that the Pinnacle system is broken in the first place anyways. You complete a Pinnacle activity and you get a material, and that material,
Pinnacle materials or whatever,
that material allows you to increase your gear by 0.1 or 0.2 points, and you can choose to put it. I can choose to make all my kinetics, highest power level I want to. I can choose to make all my boots the highest power level I want to. I can hang on to it until I get the roll that I want. Or like, I really need a +1 in my boots right now. Let me take that and put that +1 in there, versus I just got 3 powerful drops or 3 Pinnacle drops and they're all arms.
You once again hit the Forever 29 issue.
Mm-hmm.
in a certain way, except that Pinnacle isn't necessarily needed anymore, so they've kind of solved it with that. But yeah,
right. They program their player base to want to hit max power.
Yeah, which I think I've only done one of the seasons this year.
Because it doesn't matter because of the artifact.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and again, like, we're already 2 hours and 20 minutes in, so
we can definitely follow this up in a few weeks or something.
Yeah, for sure. Let us know if you guys like, Chandler's, like I said, Chandler's great. I've been talking to him about this, about being on the show since we started DDG, and you guys heard it with Paris and you heard it with Khalif. Chandler again was another sounding board of me just messaging him at all hours of the day and night, saying, because as soon as I left, he was reaching out to me and asking me when I left PS Nation. Like, as a friend, he's like, hey, like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Like, what's going on? And,
what are you doing next?
So,
because I knew you weren't gonna be able to stay away from it.
Yeah, and he was on board. I think he saw the logo. He might have been like the first person to see the logo and the name before anybody else.
I think you ran the name by me before you even officially decided on it.
Yeah, so again, like, multiple people have been pillars and huge sounding boards, and along with the community, like, you guys are like amazing and awesome. So if this is something, as always, if this is something you like and something you want to see or hear us do again with Chandler, like, let us know. I can get Chandler on. It's just like, I think him and I decided like last week that we were going to do this, so it doesn't have to be.
I'm happy to come back anytime. Honestly, it's. I sit around at home. We've got a virus outside. I got nothing else to do, right?
Yeah. So, but yeah, please just follow Chandler. His on the Twitch channel, on our Twitch stream, his handle's right there at Finch Strife. I still don't know the story behind that entirely, but that's another day.
Finch is a band that I really like, and Strife is from Cloud Strife. It's that simple.
But I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's been about 2.5 hours of your night, and I appreciate it. And I know that you love talking Destiny, and I love talking the game with you. So again, we'll have links to follow Chandler in the show notes on this show. Please keep it, give him some feedback, let him know, give him a follow, look at his stuff, like the work that they do on PlayStation Lifestyles, the writing that team does is amazing. I was looking at their content coming out after the PS5 reveal, and it was, kudos to you guys and your team. I realized a long time ago that I really hated writing, and I stopped doing it. So.
It's we got a small team, and writing it's not easy, and Like I think my last big thing that I did, aside from all the PS5 reveal stuff, was Last of Us Part 2 review, writing that out.
Please,
so that was,
go check that out. You know, because that's live now.
Spoiler free.
Yeah.
Spoiler free, in case you're wondering.
Yeah. So that's like that game is getting phenomenal reviews, and it's definitely like a must play for everybody. Whether you whatever system you do or don't play on, please borrow a PS4 and play that game. Play the first one first if you haven't done it. So, but again, our social links are in there: Facebook group, Facebook page, Patreon, early access to the show for $5, bonus episodes for $7. This one the Patreon people will get it early just because of the system, but this is just, this is not a bonus episode, so this will be live for everybody on the feed. And
it's a bonus episode.
Yeah, I mean, but again, please let us know if this is too much content. This will be like in a 10-day period, we're going to release like 4 episodes or 5 episodes, because we did like 33, and then we did the PS5 reveal, and then we did this one, and we're going to do 34. So if there's too much stuff going on, please let us know. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. Please send us feedback to both of us. And I hope everyone has an awesome week. And Chandler, thank you again so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, and we'll talk to you guys on the next one.